Terra Gallery is part of the New Media Caucus and is dedicated to promoting the creative output of our members by situating their work in thoughtfully curated exhibitions that take place across our entire web presence. New Media Caucus is an international nonprofit association formed to promote the development and understanding of new media art. We represent and serve artists, designers, practitioners, historians, theorists, educators, students, and scholars. Recognizing new media art to be inherently interdisciplinary, multimodal, and evolving, we support and advance a wide range of inquiry to catalyze further evolution of the field. The New Media Caucus is committed to extending and sustaining the diversity of our community, board, and membership, to promote an environment of equality, inclusion, and respect for difference. We prioritize inclusion as an ongoing collaborative process of growth that we continually address both within the caucus and in our field.
Welcome everyone to the 29th episode of Header Footer Presents. I'm your host Renee.
And I'm your co-host Constanza.
Inspired by the New Media Caucus's sponsored panel, Cyberfeminist Legacies in New Media Art, shown at CAA 113, in this episode we will talk about cyberfeminism, its past, its present, and its future. And since this is one of Constanza's many specialties, I'm gonna give the floor to you.
Awesome. So welcome everyone to this episode. I'm not sure where to start. I think maybe a good way to start is that this is definitely my jam. I went to Cornell and I actually studied with a professor who was part of the cyberfeminist movement, the various ones. Her name is Maria Fernandez, and she teaches new media art at the art history program. And so most of the information and the context that I know is actually thanks to her. So let's get it started. Quick rundown. I think what's important to mention is that cyberfeminist as a movement is very different across different people and groups. One of the first people and groups of people to start thinking through this, and this is all happening in the mid to late 1990s, actually. One of the first people and groups that were thinking and looking through the possibilities of cyberfeminism was VNS Matrix, which is an Australian group of feminists. And what they did is they created posters, they created billboards, they created all these little graphics that you see here. And this is one of the first manifestos that was actually written by them. So we can take a look at what it says over here, just a little bit. And I think a preface that's important to tell about the story is that cyberfeminism, as it started, was actually thinking through how male dominant the industry was of tech and science fiction, especially coming through this time period, right? And so as a response, you'll notice that they make a lot of references to body parts, the squishy, fleshy, sexy parts of us that were otherwise trying to be ignored or just replaced with like uploading someone's mind onto a computer, which is a very big trope that you see in science fiction and movies. I don't know if you've heard of the mind uploading thought experiment, Renee?
No.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It stems from like philosophy and among other fields. But the big thing was that when you reach the singularity, apparently, you would be able to upload your consciousness online.
Oh, that I knew.
Yeah. So they were responding, cyberfeminists, different ways, of course, were responding to these mythos, right? These ideas that were very prevalent of leaving what in William Gibson's Neuromancer would describe it as leaving the meat body behind. And so for cyberfeminists, the meat body, the fleshy, squishy, sexy meat body, and was so important, so much so that you get works like this by Linda Demond called Cyberflesh Girl Monster from 1995, which, if you ever get a chance, go take a look. It might be a little bit difficult to find just because I think, if I remember correctly, it was a Flash link to it. But what you see here, which was super exciting, is you see different body parts and like these morphing organic body corporeal figures. And then what the point of this, I think it was actually a CD-ROM game now that I think about it, not a flash game. What you end up getting is that you click on these different body parts and they make noises, like very sexual noises, and you go through, like, the links in order to arrive at some form of narrative, right? Um, yeah, and one of the other things to mention is that prior to the 1990s and cyberfeminism sort of emerging at this time, in order to combat but also respond to these ideas of the clean, sleek aesthetic that was very like masculine, according to them, there were pioneer artists that were thinking through these things, not in the same way, right? But you have to credit Lynn Hirschman Leeson, who is many consider to be the first cyborg artist. And so she has images like these, which is like super popular. Images like this, where you start seeing like the convergence of female and machine, and this particular case more like analog, right? But this leads to her other work that was much more technological, right? New media, like Ancient Ruby's eDream Portal. And this is a typical chatbot that you would, that is part of the tradition. And she would be trained on the conversations that you could possibly have with her, right? And she responds in a very like feminine sort of way. But her moods and these encounters that she has with people, because that's kind of how you talk about them, were affected by web traffic. So she, she was being trained on the information that she could find on the internet to also supply the answers to this too. And what's different about it is that, as opposed to Eliza, which was one of the first chatbots to be made from MIT, Agent Ruby had face. And so there was much more emotion, and there's a lot of shifting facial expressions that really corresponded with the text and the conversations that you could possibly have with her. This, of course, led Lynn Hirschman Leeson to think about a different project, sort of the same vein as Ancient Ruby, but in this case, it's called Dina from 2004, and she often works with the actress Tilda Swinton and collaborates with her to, in movies and films and things like that, right? And so what Dina does, it's a AI female character that you can actually talk to in through this installation, right? And Dina also learns by processing internet content. But this all is a response. Again, like these are ways that artists are responding, negotiating through the technological advancements that are happening at the time, right? And, you have to talk about Eliza, who was the first chatbot. But what's interesting about her is that this chatbot, which was created in 1964 at MIT, the AI lab, and was sort of the forerunner of the chatbots that we have now, like Siri and Alexa, for instance, right? But this one was created by Joseph Weizenbaum. And the funny thing about it, and there's videos of it online that you can search up, but the funny thing about it is that she had a doctor script. And a doctor script is a type of language that she responds to and responds with in order to ask questions and answer questions. So, for example, the doctor script goes, and you can see it over here. She says, "Is something troubling you?" And you say, "Men are all alike," which is kind of funny that we're talking about this in terms of cyberfeminism too. And she responds, "What is the connection, do you suppose?" And the whole conversation, you'll notice after the initial sort of surprise, is that she asks you a bunch of questions to reaffirm what you just said. So it's creating the illusion, again, if we talk about AI, right? the illusion that she understands your problems, right? Whereas she's actually just repeating the same thing you said, but in a different way, right? In the same way that doctors and therapists do that with their patients, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you have questions, Renee, because I can keep going.
It's more a comment than a question.
Yeah, jump
uh,
in.
dying. Something went the wrong way. Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned in the pieces is that it's like the fleshy body. And one thing that I think, and my students always ask me this, is why is so much feminist art so like gross or like that's what my students say. Like it's not what I think, but like they say like why is it so gross, so focused on all these things? And well, the answer is that every time we see a depiction of women, especially in arts and by men, is that it's very clinical in a way. It's always like
Yeah.
made to be the most pretty, clean version
Mm-hmm.
of a thing, right? So you can go back to the 1600s. I think it's the 1600s. Gentileschi,
Gentileschi, Artemisia, yeah. So 1600.
1600s. So when you look at her professor Caravaggio,
Mm-hmm.
his work, the slaying of Holofernes, is like very like distant and very clean and very nice, and to the point that the painting, the face of Judith, is used as a brand of pasta sauce, which is
Yeah.
ironic in so many ways. Um, Whereas Artemisia Gentileschi, her work is a little bit more, well, I don't know, it's much more visceral. You see more,
It's so visceral.
right?
Yeah, I actually like having that example also with my students because they definitely their comments are you can definitely see who understands women in these paintings is what they say. Because you're absolutely right. The one at Caravaggio is like very almost cautious. And
Hmm.
then the one in Gentileschi's is they're really going at it, like not just carving someone's head off, like beheading them, which
Yeah.
is very different. Yeah.
And it is a consequence of the Cartesian idea that there's body and mind, right? Like
Yeah.
the body has nothing to do with the mind, and that created this schism that like it leads to this separation. Because when you frame a man as creatures of intellect and women as emotions, you have again this separation
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And so when you move into the 60s with Judy Chicago, well, I think she's 70s, but anyhow, when you look at the 60s and 70s with like Marina Abramovich, with Judy Chicago, all these things, they're confronting this separation with the body. And one of the things is that the body makes, especially Western people, so uncomfortable
Yeah.
um, in terms of how it's presented, especially when it's a woman.
Yeah.
It's a gendered body, it's a sexual body, it's so many of these things. So cyberfeminism continues this tradition in because ironically, like the idea of the idea of cyberpunk is very masculine.
Yeah.
And when we were looking for an image for the intro for this slideshow that we made, it was so hard because like
Mhm.
nothing you look at is like neutral or feminine in a way that's not sexual.
Yeah.
Like every woman that you find, like is it L driver? It's L driver, I think. Yeah, well, L driver in it's Cyberpunk in Blade Runner. Um, what's the other one? The one in Cyberpunk 20? No, not Cyberpunk. The next Blade Runner. It's
Mm.
this other woman also naked all the time. Then you go into the new one. It's Hunter Schafer, still in like very tight fitting. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, she's trans, but at the same time, it's still a feminine body presenting. Um, they're always framed in this sexual manner. If you go into the video games, you go into Cyberpunk, it's still sexual, even if it's just a face. It's looking down. It's kind of it's like right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the body in tech has always been made like feminine in a way, but also very controlled. So when
Yeah.
you talk about Eliza is presented as feminine, when you talk about Alexa, she's false. I have to be careful because I don't want to activate mine. Uh, it's also feminine presence. Yeah, you can change the voices. You can even change the name.
But
But the default
yeah,
is
exactly.
female.
That's
The
what I was
same thing
gonna
with
say.
Siri. The same thing with every single other uh, assistant that we have. I mean, I guess Grok is the only one, but ironically, the reason that's that is because Elon Musk is completely unknowledgeable about what he's referencing. But yeah, so I think that's one of the things that we have to make like no, like all these things are supposed to confront you with the body
Yeah.
and its reality because like cyberpunk in a way tries to leave the body behind. So
Mhm.
does the cyborgs. I don't know how much we could say that in like things like Sterling, but Sterling still has like a very masculine.
That's the whole interesting part about Stellark is because there is a very famous quote that is often quoted by him that says the body is obsolete,
Mm,
which is like super interesting when you think about not just cyberfeminism, but where he was coming from. Also an Australian artist,
yeah.
I think Greek origin, but Stellar, like everyone, which is perfect because that's my next slide. Um,
Oh.
Yeah, Stellark is a really interesting character, I would say, because he even though he has said the body's obsolete, and you might think, okay, so there's no purpose, there's no use for the body anymore. My argument, and other people have also noticed this too, is that he is still so embedded
Hmm.
and immersed in his body in order to be able to do all these different experiments that he's done. So, for
Yeah.
example, his third arm, it's a mechanical robotic arm that he has where in one performance he draws with it, like the three arms. Um, he began as an artist that did suspension works where he is tied to hooks and
Hmm.
string and ropes, and he was just suspended. It's called body suspensions, I think. And then he moved on to tech and he did this piece called Pain Body, which is super interesting because it actually incorporates his third arm or third hand, and the piece is about an involuntary movement that you could
Hmm.
have. So you have him tied up to all these different sensors, right? And this third arm or third hand. And it's very cyborgian in nature, right? This was like mid 1990s. And
Yeah.
the performance looks something like this. And there's like a whole video that you can search up online, but it's
Yeah.
a little clunky. And what the point of it is during Ping Body, what you consider the body is completely transformed. Because the
Yes.
thing is that he was connected via sensors, and people online were able to send ping messages, and that would activate a certain body
Hmm.
part muscle. And this was done in 1995 at the Fractal Flesh event, which is also a thing that we should probably talk about, like the
Yeah.
names of these things. And it connected Paris at the Central Pompidou, Helsinki, and Amsterdam as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've his obsolete body comment is always something that I go back to because he is still so intertwined with
Embodied.
his body and embodiment that even so much as growing a third ear on his hand or his arm, again, still bodily. And I
Yeah.
think he's since then making that comment that kind of like blew up everywhere. I think you have to really think critically about what that means. It's not just about forgetting the body. I think it's about saying there's something beyond just the body in order
Hmm.
when about like prostheses or technological advancements and enhancements. And this goes back down to thinking through cyborgian culture, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think when you hear the words the body is obsolete?
Well, that is, I think it's tricky, right? Because obviously
Yeah.
he's not replacing like the whole body, and in his case, it's one of the most tame replacements of bodies I think there
Mm.
is. In the terms that it's something that he attaches, he detaches, except for the ear. But the ear is also a medical procedure that in real life is used to, like, okay, oh, you lost your ear, here's a new one that was grown on a lattice. So that's a completely different thing. But in general, his body is still there, like he's augmenting this body in a way.
Exactly.
Rather than people who actually need a replacement body parts, like, because that's one of the things. Like we pretend that the cyborg is this futuristic thing, but we have things like titanium hips. We have running blades. You know what those are, right?
Yeah.
So the running blades. We have arms that respond to connected things. Now we have like even fake eyes that are done with an eye. I mean, sorry, with a tooth. All these crazy things that are already going into the cyborg. And now, if you want to count Neuralink, which, Elon Musk is the embodiment of we have invented the torture vortex from the book Don't Invent the Torture Vortex. But anyhow, but one of the things that we kind of are ignoring, which is already happening, is the fact that this is all corporation owned. Like you don't. That's one of the ironies between like cyberpunk, like the fiction and reality. Cyberpunk and fiction, like everybody has like prosthetic arm that they fix themselves and like they add to it. Whereas in reality now, people with prosthesis are having issues where the company owns the software, the company goes out of business, and now that person's body is shut down effectively.
That's
yeah,
and the implications of that are
like, exactly.
It's insane. Yeah.
So that's one of the fictions that we've had, and I think ironically, one of the things that Pink Body does really well is that this being moved by other people.
Yeah,
it's also could be seen as a metaphor now for how a corporation can control your literal cyborg body if they so wish, and we can see that with Neuralink, which it allows people to move a mouse. Yeah, for now. Later, it's like, oh, guess what? Your service is not working unless you watch 3 hours of ads a day, right?
Yeah.
Like, we would be incredibly naive to think that's not going to happen. I mean, I pay a subscription for Amazon Prime, and I now have ads on my streaming service. And now they're asking me to pay more if I don't want to have ads. It's insane. So that belief that technology will solve everything, unless there's like serious regulations, it's not gonna be. But anyway, going back to art, it's really interesting how even Starlight's work is very much more masculine in its framing than the work of Hathaway or like later artists like Legacy or I don't know. So many. I can't remember any names right now. But you have a bunch of examples, so why don't you keep going?
Starlight is definitely a very interesting case for sure, and it brings up a lot of questions about masculinity, also mastery, technology, right? Things like that, which is in contrast to what the cyberfeminists were trying to comment on, right? However, there is another thing that was not necessarily problematic, but something that has a lot to do with women's rights and feminism as a term itself. And that is how do I put this? How feminism has historically served white women, right? And within this culture of things that were happening, and we have to remember, right? Artists were excited about this new technology and they were trying to experiment and do a whole bunch of really cool things, pushing the medium further and pushing the medium to its limits too, right?
Yeah.
But the discussions about like third wave feminism, something that started happening with this group of women that were also cyber feminists called Sub Rosa. So it's Subrosa. And they wrote a book called Domain Errors, which talks about like flesh. It talks about like the economy of bodies. It talks about cyberfeminism, but also kind of like what did cyberfeminism lack or what did it miss? And so since then, I think I need to position this as a very important text because this is what informs, in my opinion, a lot of the texts, or should inform a lot of the texts afterwards, about more of an intersectional approach to thinking about cyberfeminism. Because, like I mentioned earlier, right, feminism historically has served primarily white women and
Yeah.
affluent women.
I
And
think. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So just real quick, like I think one of the things that when we talk about feminism is that we can be for feminism, but we still have to be critical about it.
Of course.
And for example, like Susan B. Anthony, yeah, she got like the right to vote for women, but specifically white women. She was incredibly racist to an
Mhm.
incredible degree. And one of the things, like, uh, we tend to brush those things under and create these myths, and we have
Yeah,
to fight that because it just hurts everyone if we pretend
it
that
hurts
everything is
everyone.
unproblematic and perfect and flawless. But
Exactly.
yeah, so going to your thing, back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point to make, right? And the cyber feminist group called Sabrosa was a collection or a collective of women from different areas, different backgrounds. You know, some were writers, artists, theorists, etc. One of them was my professor, actually.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, and Maria Fernandez in one of because this is a collection of essays, she writes about the conditions of cyberfeminism and post-colonialism and how it's a very important critique of cyberfeminist practices and feminism in general, right? And how it had served a very specific group of women. And she asked the question amongst that essay and a different one that she wrote about new media, why isn't there any attention, to post-colonial practices and ideas in thinking through this? And so they position themselves in this particular critical movement, but also at the forefront of thinking through this in more complex ways, right? But this is what leads, in my opinion, to works like this by the this is the book launch, but it's a cyberfeminism index, which is a collection of essays and works and thoughts about cyberfeminism, but also how it has changed and through its legacy. And speaking of legacy, haha, you have the Glitch Manifesto, the Glitch Feminism Manifesto, right,
yeah,
by Legacy Russell, who is a critic, a writer, among other things, right? And I was reading about this. I was reading this book for a specific project that I'm doing, and I know you've been reading it as well,
yeah, I
right?
finished it already. Ha.
Nice. And I think this is a good part to talk about what you thought about the book, because I have thoughts myself, but I'm also curious to see what you think about it.
Oh boy. Okay. I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people, like, well, not a lot of people. Some people have had issues with it.
Mhm.
I had one of the weirdest conversations the other day with someone here in Germany. How they were saying like, oh, but it just criticizes, but offers no solutions. It just blames everything, and I'm like, sure, but it's not our job to fix it.
No,
Like,
exactly.
and I
It's
think that gets lost a lot. And this was a woman, and a very feminist one, and it's like, oh, but they just keep like assigning blame. It's like to white people and things like yeah, because the system was made by white people. It doesn't mean that you are like a problem, but it does mean that you live in this problem. It's the
and you're
house metaphor.
complicit. You're complicit,
You're
and you'll.
complicit. Yeah,
It's not even that. It's yes, you're complicit in the system, but you also benefit from the system as a person
exactly.
who pertains to the hegemonic power powerful group. But I thought it was really refreshing. And
Yeah,
your point about offering solutions or blaming, I think there are certain works that are necessary to exist as ways of determining what the problem is. And you
yeah.
cannot solution or write a solution without first knowing what the problem is,
The
right?
problem is exactly,
And
but
that could be
it
someone
also
else's
does
problem.
offer. It does offer a solution. That's the whole point of it, I think. Well, in my opinion, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, that's the glitch.
But like
And
the glitch, exactly. It's like I don't care.
exactly.
I'm not gonna define myself by these rules that you have. I'm gonna disengage completely from the system. And
Yeah.
it's your task if you want it to generate these categories, but I'm not gonna participate in it because by participating, I'm perpetuating it. So
Yeah.
that is the solution. The solution is let's stop playing by these rules.
Yeah. I love the part where she's said this many times, but also other thinkers and authors about how technology itself is derived from a very binary
Mm-hmm.
uh, sort of system that has permeated the rest in terms of a binary between very legitimately or very literally, figuratively, ones and zeros, a binary,
Yeah.
but also the binary of female and male. And this gets perpetuated in the systems that we create as
Yeah.
well. So I like her response to foregoing that completely, right? And just
Yeah.
being the glitch is, queerness, transness, right? It's thinking through things that are outside the binary. And she talks about the glitch as an error in some respects too, which I really
Yeah.
enjoy. But yeah, I don't know. What other thoughts do you have about it?
So I think it's a really interesting thing because well, first of all, it I'm ashamed to admit this, but when she starts talking about Cartesian logic, in my mind, Cartesian points of view and all these things, or because yeah, the she's still talking about René Descartes, the philosopher,
Mhm.
but I approach that from my original training, which is like math and computers and sciences. And there, when you think Cartesian, you think of coordinates, X, Y, Z,
Yeah, the planes,
right?
yeah.
The planes, right? So I was thinking that she, like, when anyone, like in art history, was talking about Cartesian, they meant like that they assigned like a sector
Hmm.
in a coordinate system. But no, it turns out that there's this idea of cogito ergo sum, and the
Hmm.
idea that there's a binary and separation between mind and body. And there's
Yeah.
like, wait, why is she talking about like coordinates? And then because it's also feminine, like glitch in technology, so it kind of got mixed in my brain. So then it's like, oh, this explains so much that I
Yeah.
never understood. So that was one thing, but also I find it really refreshing in terms of how liberating it can be for a person when you think about it, because it's like, oh, do I fit in this box? And you see this discourse in everything. You see it online, you see it on
Yeah.
TikTok, you see it on Instagram, where particularly, and you see this also like in the classroom with like the really young queer people, where they're ironically falling back into assigning boxes to everyone, or
Hmm.
accidentally not accidentally, purposefully outing their classmates or friends and things like that because they want them to fit within a box.
Yeah.
Whereas glitch feminism is like, what does it matter if you think you're bi or straight or queer or trans or bi? Just be yourself, do what you feel like being and doing, and stop defining yourself, because that only helps the system
Yeah.
sort
Hmm.
you into a box that makes it harder for you to be free. And we can
Exactly.
see that in these new laws for bathrooms, these all these things about sports and whatnot. Like the more you self-identify as, and now I just had an epiphany. Like
Oh, wait, share
five,
that.
like 5, 6 years ago, I wrote a paper called "Self-Othering in the Art World,"
Hmm.
and it's this idea that sometimes certain minority groups like assign themselves other identities, like they set themselves as the other purposefully within, but it's still within the system, and that makes it easier for the system to discriminate them.
Mm.
So when I was doing this, I was thinking of Mexican artists and how they themselves assigned themselves the identity of Mexican artist and play by the rules of that identity. So
Right.
you would see that a lot when I was teaching. This was because I was teaching, and it's like you saw like a lot of women artists or female presenting artists dressing like Frida Kahlo, wearing the colors, using these Mexican outfits even though they themselves, I mean, every Mexican has a little bit of indigenous, but it's not, doesn't mean that they're indigenous. I don't know if
Mhm.
that makes sense to most people, but it's different being as someone that grew up in an indigenous community with indigenous practices and then
Yeah.
just being a product of the colonization. That does not make you indigenous. And that was one
Yeah.
of the problems with Frida Kahlo herself. Anyhow, so you saw in art school, so in the art schools I was teaching, a lot of women who replicated the Frida Kahlo like performative space, right? They
Yeah.
did surrealism, all of them. All of them used the same iconography that Frida Kahlo used. They, and again, this is not a criticism of what they did, but like they all like started letting
Self-other.
their body hair grow. It was like, in a way, it was like copying what they thought being another was.
I think that's a very interesting and could be like another topic of discussion for sure in
Yeah.
terms of contemporary art, because I have a class on contemporary art, and one of the things that we talk about also is this self-othering is in part and parcel the symptom of the system which
Mm-hmm.
exoticizes certain
Mm-hmm.
cultures and will
Of course.
reinforce that exoticism in order to meet the market demands and like expectations and things like that. Right.
And even
So,
academic expectations.
oh, for sure. But like, for example, artists that, feel like they have to adhere to a very specific
Yes,
aesthetic because they know that that is marketable or,
exactly.
that's going to sell, because even though that comes to the detriment of self-othering, it's such a big thing, I find, in contemporary art too. Which is
And it
why,
never ends well.
and sometimes that's why things become or feel homogenous too, right?
Mm-hmm.
In various ways as well.
Yeah, so the glitch feminism really resonated with me in those terms, and I do think that it's a really important book that also criticizes the issues that cyberfeminism
Yeah.
had. Right, like a lot of its emphasis on femininity and the goddess and
Yeah.
these very second wave ideas, which
Yeah.
ironically are coming back so much. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. But that also, like, a lot of the language that cyberfeminists use in the 90s, and I think what Legacy and among other Legacy et al., other groups of women and feminists too are responding to is Donna Haraway's influential
Yeah.
text, The Cyborg Manifesto, from the Simian Cyborgs and Women. It was actually an essay, and the title is actually much longer, and it had to do with, oh, let's see if I remember, socialism as well, which is really interesting, and not a lot of people remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, Haraway gave the language to a lot of the things, and imagining what the cyborg figure could be, which for her was this. It's weird because she still speaks of binaries while at the same time trying to forgo them, because she says women are part cyborg type women, but she also wanted to dismantle these binaries of natural, artificial, women, male, etc. Right? Um, and I think she's, since writing this book, she's come back and like rethought about what it meant to write in that specific context and time, but also how can it change. And I think that's what Legacy Russell does really well. It's an updated, not to say it's an updated version of Donna Haraway's, but it's a much more critical um, expose of what happened with cyberfeminism, right, and how we can think differently in today's context, right? Because works of art and writing are always within their context. They're not, you have to take it with a grain of salt almost, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because one of the things that ironically, well, not ironically, but like links it to Manifesto is this phrase that there is nothing about being female that naturally binds women. And a lot of people didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in a way, that kind of fits with Glitch Manifesto. Like, stop defining yourself. Like, what is feminine? Like, what? Because when we talk about femininity, you have to consider like femininity is not the same in Mexico, that in the U.S., then in Canada. The
Exactly.
three countries in North America,
Mm-hmm.
and what defines a woman is completely different in all three. And yeah, so one of the things that you
Context
do in one is considered, yeah. So I do think that that's really interesting. But yeah, it's an old text, and it's a product of its time. And
It is. Mm-hmm.
we cannot, because we like to pretend that text can be can exist like divorced from everything else, but that's
No.
not true.
No, it's
And
not.
yeah, I mean, she was working within a context, then she comes back later, and yeah, it's totally normal to change your mind and say, God, what was I thinking? I've certainly done that with like exhibitions that I did in the past, and I look at them now and it's like, oh my God, this is so sexist and so trash, and I don't want to ever see it again. I
Yeah.
have a horrible exhibition. Thankfully, it never happened, but it was the body as an object completely decontextualized, and it was like, okay, well, this doesn't happen. This doesn't work. Now I can see it, but back then in 2010, I was completely blind to it. It was stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of those things. Like you grow as an artist, you grow as a person, and the Cyber Manifesto, which I already found the full title that you were saying. It
Mm-hmm.
is gigantic. It's a manifesto for cyborg science, technology, and socialist feminism in the 1980s.
Exactly.
And it
Yeah.
was published in Socialist Review.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy. Um, but yeah, I think one of the interesting things of this text, and I haven't fully read it. I just you absorb it through osmosis almost.
Yeah.
So I have to read it because of the work I'm doing now, but I've had some like life got in the way. Um, but I will fully read it now. Um, but from what you read on other ones, like the language is very interesting from the excerpts that you see,
Yeah.
and yeah, it I think it only envisions one way to be a cyber feminist, not a woman, but a cyborg feminist, and I think that's what a lot of people take issue with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think maybe a good question to pose right now is what do you think, like I know we talked about Legacy Russell's book, but in terms of glitch feminism, what do you think feminism looks like now and will look like in the
Oh,
future? Because I have a great example, but I'm curious what you think about
okay.
it.
Well, I mean, obviously with the disclaimer, I'm a guy, right? Um, because obviously you see things from different perspectives, and you get like different things. And I'm not saying that that gives me like a privilege point because it doesn't. But you see, like feminism is fracturing into multiple uh forms, and some
Mhm.
are very progressive, some are going back. So we're getting, I mean, trans radical. No, what is it? Trans exclusionary radical feminism, which is second wave feminism, with all the extreme approaches that it had, and the faults that it was super white and did not consider for any other form of existence than being a white woman. To things like this feminism that is finally, well, not finally, but that it's really permeating into the idea that feminism is not about a fight between man and woman. It's about freeing everyone, and that includes everything in between, which is
Exactly.
really important. And I think things like glitch feminism help with that,
Yeah,
because the younger generation are going back to second wave feminism. And honestly, like one of the examples that really disturbed me, and I understand the point of being is being made, I just don't think it's being made really well. It's the bear and the woman. Sorry, the bear and the man in the forest thing, which
okay.
is, I don't know. Have you heard of this argument?
No, no.
So basically, online there was this discussion about whether you as a woman, would you choose to be alone in a room with a bear, or would you choose to be alone with an unknown man?
Oh, okay.
And most of the women online choose the bear, right? And in a way, the point is, well, the bear will kill me, but it won't do anything else to me. And the bear is just existing as a bear, like it has no ill will and cannot think and attack me just because, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you realize that these are arguments that get co-opted so easily, into racism, because it's like, would you rather be with a bear or a Mexican man like me? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that has already happened. There was, I don't know if you heard this analogy that Trump used a lot. There was the Skittles.
No, I haven't.
They used it against what is it called, like immigrants. It's like, oh, there's 500 immigrants, but if one was a terrorist, would you still? So the argument is, if you had a bowl of Skittles and two of the Skittles were poisoned, would you still take a Skittle? And they
Okay.
use that as an argument against allowing
Immigration.
immigrants in. That
Yeah.
was originally a second wave argument
Oh.
that not female, feminists used to argue against the violence against women. It's like, we have to disengage from men, because if I gave you a bowl of Skittles and one was poisoned, you would not eat the Skittles. And the
Yeah.
same they're saying. So that was what created this schism in like the radical feminists. So
Yeah.
we're seeing that those arguments coming back, and I hate that,
It's
because
awful.
yeah, it just generates two things. It gives more fuel to people like Andrew Tate,
Mm-hmm.
because we're going back to the angry feminist stereotype, which is not true.
Yeah.
Like, I've met second wave feminists like Judith Butler and who's female gaze is Judith Butler?
Laura Mulvey.
Laura Mulvey. I worked for Laura Mulvey for a weekend. Fantastic people, really. Not like, and they were second wave, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not extremists. She has a husband. She talks about her husband in a very loving way. But we have this stereotype because of these extremist examples that were being used.
Yeah.
And
And
we're
I
going back to that, and I don't like that. And when it should be, we are all together in this, and we should all be
and
equal.
that's a point that bell hooks among and specifically bell hooks, the author,
Mhm.
and Kimberly Crenshaw, who are women and feminists who are thinking about not thinking about cyberfeminism, sorry. They're thinking about feminism in an intersectional way.
Yeah.
And this is where you get the third wave. That, for example, my professor, Domain Errors, was talking about as well. And it's like, how come we're not talking about class, race,
Yes.
all of these different things, like queerness, transness? Why aren't we
Yes.
talking about this? And why is this not enveloped into our fight for equality, right? And so I know Bell Hooks talks about these different spheres of privilege and like inclusionary versus exclusionary, and what to do if you're in a privileged position. You should give up power. You should do all these, she outlines a whole bunch of different things that you could do in order to recenter the peripheral, or what she would call the periphery, right? Or people within the periphery. But this third wave thinking that is very progressive is something that gives me hope, to be honest, because even though, like, I know you're saying that you've seen a tendency for second wave rhetoric coming back up again, there are artists and there are people that are still fighting for equality in an intersectional way.
Yeah.
And that brings me to this fellow.
Hey.
Yeah, and this is Being, Being, like being, like ontology. um and I actually got to meet Being, which is an AI avatar
Ooh,
slash robot,
look at
at
you.
I know, at the exhibition that I went to in 2022, I believe, at the New York Park Armory, called Assembly. The artist is a fantastic artist called Rashad Newsom. And um what's fascinating about it is that once you enter the Park Armory is a huge building that has a very big, what do you call it, like a space called Drill Hall,
Atrium?
like an atrium, yeah. And that's where they usually do their performances and events. And what's cool about it is that the moment I stepped into this exhibition, I was wowed immediately, because it was just full of holograms, it was full of video mapped walls and
Oh,
images of so many different things. And I think I have a video that we can show if we have time. It had collage, it had sculpture, it had everything. And it became very visually and intellectually overwhelming, but in a
yeah.
cool way, because things were like pulsating, morphing. They were transgressive, and it was everywhere. And so the highlight for me of this exhibition was this entity called being, and it was projected onto a wall, a large screen, as an avatar. The whole history behind this character, though, is that it's based on a non-binary digital griot, is what Rashad Newsom talks about. And a griot, Griot, is actually borrowed from the West African griot figure. And the griot figure in West Africa is supposed to be like a storyteller, a singer, and an oral historian. And so what you get is this entity that is trained on the data of Black thinkers and authors, among so many other poets, etc. And Newsom was actually thinking through the many different ways that they could wrestle with how to present being as a trans body. And what's interesting about being is that it becomes an amalgamation of voices, thinkers, performers, because being's body is actually the data and the mocap, so motion capture data that you get from Vogue dancers that were really popular in like 1960s, 1980s ball culture in like New York and Los Angeles, among other places, right? And the thing that I love the most is that Rashad Newsom says he was thinking through agency. And what does that mean? And so he says, for him, agency meant that being could break protocol, could break its script and go rogue. And that to me was like what Gilles Deleuze would call a line of flight, because it's a possibility of something that can go rogue, like can just express themselves and not be tied to its script. And I found that to be super metaphorical, but also like generative to think about in terms of like someone else's agency, like as a person living in this complicated and complex world of today. So yeah, I don't know. It was inspirational as it was generative at the same time.
Send, stretch, sway, bend, right here, right now. No conditions have power over you. No personalities have power over you. No circumstances have power over you. You are where you intend to be. You are pleased. You are brilliant. You are blessed. The ancestors smile. You are the manifestation of their love and attention. They are your angels. Those you know and name, and those you cannot. This is your journey. This is your exploration. You are incomparable. You, a unique and perfect expression of Source. You have never been alone. You have never been told no. You chose a series of obstacles through which you broaden and enlarge. As you contemplate the abundant energy that has brought you to this time-space reality, you now feel the overwhelming expanse of healing and opportunity. Your mind has evolved beyond all constructs. You are not your ethnicity. You are not your assigned gender. You are not your sexuality or ability. Gently allow breath. You are sacred spirit, celestial and heavenly. You are pure source energy. Always. Only. Ever. Enough.
That's just, I'm going to show one last video of what the exhibition actually looked like. It was phenomenal. Like one of the best exhibitions I've ever seen in my life. Okay, and this will be very brief. But you sort of come into the doors of the drill hall and you see all of this. Just Vogue dancing, and it was spectacular.
No conditions have power over you.
How are those holograms
No
floating?
personalities have power over
It's a
you.
lot of video projected
No
into walls too.
circumstances have
But the
power over
holograms,
you.
I have no idea. They were
You are
just
where
so
you
cool.
intend to be.
Yeah. Whew.
You are pleased.
And then you got into
You are
this space
brilliant.
where being is.
You are blessed.
Oh,
The
this
ancestors smile.
The sculptures
You
were
are the
fantastic.
manifestation of their
They were
love
like
and attention.
clear, like blackness. It was
Catwalk is an
awesome.
exaggerated feminine walk where the legs are crossed over each other, the hips are thrust from side to side, and the hands are thrown forward in opposition to the legs. Right hip out, staying on your tippy toes.
It's so
We
cool.
must keep moving on from disappointments, advancing with those hips swaying, acknowledging our abilities, ignoring our inner critics, and connecting with loved ones who appreciate us. The only way to really transcend the systems of oppression in your life is to start thinking critically about them.
Yes.
Organize yourselves into groups and discuss.
How does white supremacy affect us in our everyday lives, and what's the action we can take to basically dismantle that in some sort of form in the next week?
Me being a product of the 50s and 60s, it was not, I had white dolls. Everything was white. Everything. Everything. That's how systemic racism starts.
Yeah. So there's more. We can put the link to the video for everyone to enjoy. Yeah. How are we doing on time?
1 hour exact.
Okay.
Minus. So we have like more time because we spent some time on
Okay. Do you want to
these things.
slowly
Well,
end?
we have to close it. Yeah, we just close it a little bit, and then we can mention like some things.
Okay. So
All right.
Okay. Go. Yeah, so this was a really good example of thinking through the legacies of cyberfeminism, what it could mean if we think through this oppression and form of violence that we experience, but in different ways, obviously, to different degrees, but thinking about it through intersectionality and how, in order to combat the system of oppression, we have to work together to fight not only misogyny, but also class structures, systemic racism, among other things too, right?
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially with like this new feminism, like you're saying. Like one of the things that I think feminism in general has struggled in the past is, and I'm not blaming feminism for this. It's more like public in general is this misunderstanding that it's women against men, when the idea is that patriarchy hurts men as well.
Yeah,
it hurts everyone. Let's just put it that way. Like if the patriarchy hurts everyone, because when there's only one way to be a man, if you don't meet those standards, then you become other, even though they're telling you you're not. And that's how you end up with like people like Andrew Tate and all these things.
Yeah.
So I think this intersectionality and the way that like new movements are approaching it is much better than the original idea of the original idea of equality was really good, but then we had this idea of we have to disengage from patriarchy, and that somehow got twisted it to let's separate from men completely, which achieves nothing. It achieved nothing. It just created a problem for future feminists, I think. But yeah, so this is really interesting, and coming at it from the area of technology, which is the last thing I wanted to mention. It's why it's new media. It's because it was new, and like men had not had the time to claim it completely. Although we could argue that that's already happened now. But I mean, when you think about like the big names, it's your friend. What's his name? Your favorite artist in all the world.
No. Yeah, him.
Yeah, anyway, so, and I'm not criticizing like the other art. This one I am, because I'm not a fan. But like when you think of Jeffrey Shaw, you think of Jody, you think about Rafael Lozano Hemmer, you think about Sterlag, you think about like, so there's it was a field that started with women, but now it's again co-opted by men. And that's a little bit like disappointing, because even when you think about like legacy, you don't really hear about Legacy's work. You hear about, well, artwork. You hear about her book,
Her writings, yeah.
her writing, yeah, but it's never about what she is actually doing right now, right? Like, you hear about all these artists, always male. Maybe it's intersectional in a way. Like Rafael Alejandro is Mexican, but he's like Canadian, so it's already white. But you also have what's his name? No, Jeffrey Shaw is white. All these people, Sterling is white. All these people are male. And okay, you have a few black artists that are also mentioned a lot, but it's still sad to see that. And I hope glitch feminism makes it so that we can go back to a more women-led movement.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
But anyhow, do you want to leave us? Well, not leave us. You want to give us one final thought? Process.
Yes, let's marinate on thinking critically and thinking intersectionally, because power affects us in different ways, right? But in order to combat the system of patriarchy, we have to work together. So, yay!
Yeah. Anyhow, so thank you everyone for listening to this episode on cyberfeminism. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And well, thank you so much. I don't know if you want to say anything else.
No, thanks for keeping us happy and motivated to create all these podcast episodes, right? It's really exciting, and I'm hoping that you will get something out of it as well, right? It's thought-provoking, at least.
All right. Well, thank you everyone, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.